Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today it is Poetry Thursday, so I wanted to talk about some fun short form, that's actually Short Story Tuesday. I'm thinking of, poetry. I want to talk about some cool, interesting, sometimes weird poetry. Today's poem is about the transgender identity, as well as institutionalization and confinement. I am referring to On Confinement by Torrin A. Greathouse. For those who don't know, Torrin A. Greathouse is a California poet, so from the region, near the region where I am. There's a big difference between Northern California, where I'm at, and Southern California, where Greathouse is from. Two different Californias there. She is trans, as I may have mentioned. She is also a disabled poet, or a poet with disabilities. She walks around with a cane. I don't know what that's for. I haven't asked, and I'm not going to ask. She also has said on her website that she is part of the cripple punk genre. I don't quite know what that means. It sounds like cripple punk is the idea that those with disabilities are not like only here for inspirational stories. You can tell a wide variety of stories with individuals with disabilities, and they don't necessarily have to be motivational, which I wholeheartedly agree with. I haven't really found too much cripple punk literature out there. If anyone can make any recommendations, I would love to hear so below. Torrin A. Greathouse is a newer poet, writing poetry about the LGBT community, particularly her and her partner and the experiences that she deals with. And her poetry has really spoken to me, which is why I wanted to talk about it. But also because for the next month and a half or maybe 2 months, I don't know how long this is going to go on for. I thought it was going to go on till the end of June, but I've decided that my pride showcasing of LGBT poets is going to continue through the end of May, well past June, and maybe to the end of July, basically talking as much as I can about LGBTQA poets until I get bored or until I decide to stop. So without further ado, let's talk about On Confinement. I will read the poem, do a little bit of an analysis, and we will move on from there. On Confinement. I sit across the table from my partner in the atrium of the psychiatric holding facility, our hands churched into our laps. We are not allowed to touch. The air between us thick as perspex. They tell me all the ways this place resembles a prison. Everything sterile white, so clean it could almost disinfect a memory. In 1987, Jeremy Bentham conceived of what would become the most common prison design, the panopticon, intended to control prisoners through the illusion that they are always under surveillance. My partner tells their therapist that they are afraid of taking their own life, that they balanced on a building's edge and 3 officers escort them from the room. The first cop who ever handcuffed me was my father, left me bound till my fingers blued. On the days when I can't remember his face, he becomes the scent of vodka and zip ties, the sound of cuffs and a bottle pedaling into blades. At the booking office, they remove my glasses, and the guards blur into a procession of fathers. I bring my partner clothes and pads when the hospital decides to hold them longer, shove each shirt that could mark them as queer back inside the closet, and shut it like a mouth. The word faggot scrawls across the jail guard's lips like graffiti. When I visit my partner, they insist on staying inside the sky above, the patio cordoned off with chicken wire. I plead my sentence down in exchange for my face, my prints, my DNA, and 10 years probation. When I see a cop, I fear even my breath criminal, and when my therapist asks me if I'm suicidal, I lie. Perhaps both are a kind of surveillance. Tear gas floods the street, sharpens water to a blade hidden in the orbit of my eye, and just like this, a squad car remakes my sadness as a weapon. If my partner snaps cuffs around my wrist and I ask for this, have they also weaponized my desire? A woman in the facility tells my partner, I know what you are, says sinner, says antichrist. My partner goads her on, babbles in false tongues, and is confined to their room for safety. Once a cop dragged me into an alley and beat me like he knew exactly what I was. What does it say if sometimes when I ask my partner to hit me, I expect his fist tightened in their throat, his voice bruising their tongue? I am arrested and placed in the men's jail in solitary confinement. They tell me this is protective custody, that they couldn't afford the lawsuit if I were killed. In this way, they tell me I am a woman, only when I am no longer breathing. The origin of the word prison is the Latin prehender, to take. It follows then that to take your life is to prison the body beneath dirt. Historically, suicide is a criminal act. Balanced on a building's ledge, I imagine some permutation of this moment where to fail at death would be a breach of my probation. We both weep for the first time upon release when we see the sky, pale blue, sliced through with a single helix of razor wire and bordered in sterile white. And so that was on Confinement. In terms of analysis, there is quite a bit to talk about with this poem. It sounds like Torrin A. Greathouse is talking from her own perspective here of something that has happened in her past with her partner, where she talks about her partner in prison, or not in prison, but in a mental institution of some side, like a hospital facility, where her partner cannot leave because her partner is suicidal, or has thoughts of suicide, as Torrin, or the narrator, is recalling this, they talk about their own experience in their own past, how they too were put in a prison for what appears to be rioting or protesting of some kind, if I'm reading the poem correctly. And she talks about her past of being beaten by police officers, of being told by the prison that, like, we can't afford for you to die, but we're also not going to put you in the right prison because there are some weird rules and weird laws that guide that. And also talking about her problematic relationship, to say the least, with her father. And all of that has combined to really create this narrator, this person in the present moment who is dealing with what appears to be pretty heavy PTSD, as well as depression or anxiety and suicidality. They want to take their own life. They're having thoughts of taking their own life because of what they're going through. And I think layered in all of this is, layered around the entire poem, is the knowledge of what is happening to people like Torrin all around the country, where, like, even prior to what's happening now, like 20 years ago, people who are trans were treated, or have been treated, pretty poorly, to the point where they are denied basic rights, and a lot of laws are written governing their bodies and dictating whether or not they can be trans at all. And that has continued much until, like, this present moment, existing, where like the parents of trans children are being questioned by social services in Texas, and many other states are enacting some pretty harsh laws about the trans community because Republicans believe, and to some extent they are correct, that fighting trans individuals is a winning issue because it plays to their base. And while that's not directly like what this poem is about, this is more about the individual experience. Like, it's easy to see that all of these issues are converging on Torrin and her partner to make her life extremely miserable. And one big issue that pops up here also popped up in the poem I talked about, the mortician in San Francisco last week, and is generally a topic that comes up anytime I talk about abolition, is the relationship to the police. How her father was a police officer who handcuffed her and beat her, left her bound, parental abuse there, but also something that's pretty consistent with police officers in that they beat their own family. not all police officers, mind you, but there is a correlation between police officers and domestic abuse with the family, and that's not so good. And then there's another element of this poem that I really like is how desire is turned and like it's made to feel like a bit of shame, like because of the events of what is happening in this person's life. Like they like it ruins other aspects of their life. Torrin says, if my partner snaps cuffs around my wrist and I asked for this, have they also weaponized my desire? And so like they weaponized the laws and whatnot. The system is against trans individuals, but they've also seemed to weaponize their desire because they can't, if they're into kink or something like that, but even like basic sex can't feel that great because the system has told you that you're wrong and that your sexual desires are wrong, and you're bound to feel a little sense of shame if you're constantly exposed to these messages. Even if you haven't internalized them yourself, like you still might feel that shame. And so for Torrin and for many people like Torrin, there's that question of, you know, is this a product of, am I a product of the system that has been created? Like, have they turned everything against me and I can't really be a normal person in this society because these conservatives, these Republicans, these inept politicians want me to feel like I'm a creature of burden. And by proxy, like they've made suicide illegal. But also I think the goal is suicide by belittling these people so much, by dehumanizing them so much that they feel that suicide is the only option and they take their lives. I would not, I fully believe, I would not hesitate to believe that is exactly what conservatives are doing. That they're bullying these groups so much, targeting them, and they don't care if they die. Because if they die, that's one less trans. Like that's exactly what I said about Harvey Milk last week. Like if Harvey Milk dies, that's one less queer you have to worry about. And so I feel like there's a kind of shared message in both of these poems, that the system is ultimately against individuals who don't fit the norm in our heteronormative society. And so those are my thoughts on Confinement by Torrin A. Greathouse. I'm going to put a link to the poem below. I encourage you to read it and think your own thoughts about it, because there's a lot that's in there that I didn't touch upon because we'd be here all day, and usually I like it if my Poetry Thursday videos are a bit shorter. But there is a lot worth discussing in this poem, not even to talk about how she says that when she takes off her glasses, she sees a blur of fathers, so past coming to affect the present, and a whole bunch of other stuff we're talking about in general about the prison system. But yeah, so if you read this poem before, or you simply want to talk about what I said here, do so below. Let's have a discussion about On Confinement. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about Torrin, more people can find out about this poem, and Poetry Thursday, so that more people can just be talking about poetry on BookTube in general. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and LGBT travels. Farewell.